We will call to order City Council meeting for November 13th, 2017. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Here.
Mayor Riggle?
Here. We will take off the motion to excuse since Councilman Jones is here. And tonight, our invocation will be led by Theodore Higginbotham, who is a dear friend of mine that I met probably back in 1985. And she's from the Zion Christian Fellowship in Powell. If you will come forward, if you will all please stand, and this will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for the councilmen and women in this place today. We want to thank you, Lord God, for this office that they hold. We ask you, Lord God, to give them wisdom to make sound decisions. We thank you for the infrastructure that they have so faithfully worked on to establish for Delaware community. Give them the knowledge, bless them and their family as they continue on in the service of your people. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Item 5 is the approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held October 23rd, 2017, as recorded and transcribed. What is the wish of council?
I move for approval of the minutes. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Browning, a second by Mr. Schaefer. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is the consent agenda. Elena, if you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary for the Planning Commission meeting held October 4th, 2017. Item B, acceptance of the motion summary for the Historic Preservation Commission meeting held September 27th, 2017. Item C, acceptance of the motion summary for the Shade Tree Commission meeting held September 26th, 2017. Item D, resolution number 17-61, a resolution appointing members to various boards, commissions, and/or committees and specifying the term of the appointments. Item E, established November 27, 2017 at 7:20 p.m. as a date and time for a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 17-72, an ordinance for the Judith D. Hook Revocable Trust for approval of a rezoning amendment for approximately 44.258 acres on parcel number 519-312-01-009-000 from R4 Medium Density Residential District and R6 Multifamily Residential District to R3 One Family Residential District and located on the west side of Troy Road. Item F, established November 27, 2017 at 7:30 p.m. as a date and time for a public hearing and first reading of ordinance number 17-74. An ordinance making appropriations for the year 2018 and declaring an emergency. And item G, established December 11, 2017 at 7:30 p.m. as a date and time for a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 17-74, an ordinance making appropriations for the year 2018 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. What is the wish of council on the consent agenda?
Move for approval of the consent agenda. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 7 is letters, petitions, or public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward at this time? Seeing none, we'll close that portion and we'll move on to committee reports. Mr. Jones?
I have nothing, Mayor.
Mrs. Keller?
None.
None.
Say your name, Mr. Rohr. Mr. Hellinger? Mr. Schaefer?
Actually, I have one. Public safety meets next Monday, the 20th at 7:30 following our reorganization.
Very good. Okay.
And Madam Mayor?
Yes. Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Like I'm playing Mother May, I hear.
So I put on each of your desks and also for people in the community, a little flyer about Main Street, Delaware's First Friday event for December. It is a weekend event, so it starts with Friday, December 1st at our First Friday from 6 to 9, where we'll have the annual tree lighting ceremony. Coca-Cola Christmas truck's going to be here. Carolers, we're going to have carriage rides, which the carriage rides will occur from Fridays on during the holiday season. And Santa will be there. And we have the Gleis, correct? So Susie Bibler's here, our executive director. So she worked to get Gleis, and I believe that's set up at Willis. And Gleis is like fake ice. So you'll have, I'm sorry? Oh, you'll have ice skating rentals, so that'll be kind of different and fun. And then Saturday, there's events
Wait,
going
we
on.
forgot the reindeer.
Oh, yes, she was able to get reindeer, even though I like the idea of using dogs with the antler.
Thank you, Susie.
Saturday, December 2nd, they have an event going from 11 to 1 where it's Dash for Dasher. And it's kind of you go to the different stores looking for clues. It's something great for the kids to do. It's monetary donations, or also they can donate food to the food bank for it as a participation. And they have the holiday open house that's all day through the shops. And then Sunday, because it's a whole weekend event, is actually the Christmas parade. So that starts at 3 p.m. It's going to be an exciting weekend. And November's First Friday was wonderful. Weather was beautiful. We had great attendance for November, and it's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, committee reports. Okay, we'll move on to presentations. Susie and Holly, if you will meet me, Susie Bibler from Main Street, I'm sorry, and Holly Quinn from the Chamber, if you will meet me up front. Pardon?
What you I came with reinforcements.
Ah, you'll be fine. So I don't know how many of you know this, but November 25th is Small Business Day. So we really encourage all of our community to go out and support our small businesses, not necessarily go to the malls, go on Amazon, but go out and physically go to your small businesses and buy them, and hopefully buy Christmas gifts. Glasses, I got them on. Whereas the City of Delaware has a responsibility to recognize occasions of outstanding significance. Whereas the government of Delaware, Ohio celebrates our local small businesses and the contribution they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are currently 28.8 million small businesses in the United States that represent 99.7% of all businesses with employees in the United States, and they're responsible for 63% of net new jobs created over the past 20 years. Where small businesses employ 48% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, whereas on average, 33% of consumers' holiday shopping will be done at small, independent-owned retailers and restaurants, where 91% of all consumers believe that supporting small businesses, independently owned restaurants, and bars are important, whereas 76% of all consumers plan to go at one or more small businesses as part of their holiday shopping. Whereas the City of Delaware supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve. Advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now therefore I, Carolyn K. Riggle, Mayor of the City of Delaware, do hereby proclaim November 25th, 2017 as Small Business Saturday, and urge all residents in our community across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday throughout the year. Thank you very much. Thank you.
May I say-
I would like,
Yes.
yes, for each of you.
Thank you so much for recognizing this. Our small business owners work so hard in the downtown and appreciate your support. And everyone get out there and shop.
I brought with me some board members, Zach Price, who lives downtown, Eric Arnett, Jack Brickner, and in about 6 weeks will be our board chair, Glenn Marslaw. Their support, chamber is, we wouldn't be who we are. Small business is the absolute infrastructure of Delaware. It is the infrastructure. And of course, we represent beyond Delaware, and I will accept this on behalf of the chamber, but this is really goes to the small businesses that jump off a cliff every day and everything is on the line and they don't get sick days. And the city, in the 9 years I have been here, you have always recognized that and you supported it in such a tremendous way. And I thank you very much on behalf of all the small businesses we represent. We're so proud to. Thank you so much.
You take out red eyes? Yep. Everybody's got red eyes.
Thank you.
That's what I call you further.
Okay, item 10, I want to read those into the record. We'll start with A.
Item A, consideration of the new liquor permit for Asahi Restaurant Group LLC doing business as Asahi Japanese Restaurant at 1139 Columbus Pike, Delaware, Ohio, 43015, permit class D1.
Chief Pudzianowski?
Madam Mayor, members of council, for consideration is a request from Asahi to get a D1 permit, which will allow them to sell beer inside the restaurant. It's an existing business, no issues, no police issues, no applicant issues, no issues with the location, no reason for us to require hearing, no legislative basis at all.
Is there a motion to not send that to the state?
Yeah, I make a motion that we accept that liquor permit without objection.
Second. A motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Ms. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item B.
Madam Mayor, members of council, item B is a request for a liquor permit at the London Road Shell. This is a gas station at the corner of London and Liberty that's sat vacant for some time, so it's actually nice to get something in there. The current request is for beer and wine for carryout. The location you'll see has quite a history of police activity there, but that's not related to, it's not related to the business. It's just used as a location for a traffic stop or something like that. So that's a little misleading, but there's no draw on police services at this location. There's nothing in the applicant's background, nothing about the existing or the business is actually in there running now. No reason for us to object. We found no legislative basis. The applicant is also here, so if you have any questions, the applicant is here to answer questions.
The applicant at all, are we good? It looks great too. I drove by the other day. I like all the open sides. They really cleaned it up, so thank you.
Thanks for moving in.
So what is the wish of council on item B?
Move to accept the liquor permit without objection.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr? Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Item 11 is second reading of ordinance number 17-69. Elaine, if you'll please read this on the record.
For 1769, an ordinance supplementing the 2017 appropriations ordinance to provide additional funding for land development, engineering, professional services, and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause, that this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to provide for the timely review of development plans and for the continued utilization of construction inspection services, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Mr. Farina?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. This is the second request like this year. We came in August and asked for $1,000 because of the level of land development activity. And that level has continued all the way through and is still very, very active even through November and through December. So we are seeking approval of additional $350,000 supplemental appropriation to continue the project plan review and construction inspection through the end of the year. I'll say that we've had, in my more than 2 decades, this is the busiest land development season we have ever had in Delaware. If you get out and tour some of the projects, you can see the amount of activity. There's 61 active projects in the engineering division right now, from preliminary planning through construction right now, which is the most we've ever had at one time as well. All expenditures are generally reimbursable, and the reimbursement also includes staff expense as well. Predicting our contract expense to be just about $1.2 million this year. That would be for our plan reviewers, construction inspectors. In-house operating expenses of about $0.4 million. That's our half-time reimbursable. So total expense is around $1.6 million. Our revenue fees look like we're going to be between $1.5 and $1.7 million this year coming back to us. So we'll recapture our costs. So we do spend what we collect, and it goes right back to good quality construction inspection and plan review out there. So that's what we're looking at. Continue our normal operations. Can I answer any questions regarding the materials provided?
Any questions for Bill?
I just have one for Tom. I can't remember if we added that staff position. Will you remind me?
We had made a request for a, if you're talking about the inspector, we hadn't added any, we added a engineering position.
We did.
Yes, that's in the 17 budget. In the 18 budget, which you'll receive on Wednesday, there's consideration for a inspector position.
Okay.
But yes, the engineering project engineer is in the budget. That person is working, and Bill can kind of review what they're.
Correct, and that person assists with the plan review and has gotten us back on track to try to satisfy some of the BIA requirements to have a timely plan turnaround. So we have, that person has greatly helped with that, and also has been helping with just some of trying to catch up in some of the field monitoring. As Tom mentioned, we are going to be seeking to restore our inspection level to prior levels because of the current level of activity we have. And as much as we saw last year, we had construction activity all through the winter last year. We predict to have the same thing this year. So we're going to be able to keep our staff fully busy, rely on consult services throughout the winter months as well. We'll have more discussions with budget presentation regarding that.
Would it help to add capacity for the engineering rather than contracting out all of this?
I mean, that's a debate that you can have. It kind of depends on what your crystal ball says about development. To the extent that development drops off at some point, you do have capacity available. We do contract a considerable amount of it out. We are looking at the second inspector position. I think at this point, I'd recommend keeping things where they are. But I do want to point out, Bill said BIA required timeframes. The BIA required that we had conversations with the BIA about trying to shorten up the review time. So it wasn't a requirement of theirs. They don't require, I mean, they're not, it's a request, and we work with them cooperatively to try to shorten some of these review times.
Yeah, thanks for correcting that, Tom. And Councilwoman, for plan review, that's maybe about 20% of our total cost is the plan review. The real significant cost of all of this money we spend is through the construction inspection. We've had as many as 12 to 14 contract inspectors in town underneath one employee. That's why the request additional staffing is going to be underneath the construction inspection. That's where our real deficiency in level of service. The second full-time plan review person in development has made a world of difference in terms of our ability to be timely and responsive to the contractor and developer's needs up front in the planning side.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Bill? What is the wish of council?
Move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 17-69.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
I move for the approval of the emergency clause on ordinance 17
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 17-69.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Browning. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Second. Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 13, which is consideration of resolution 17-60. Let's do 12. Second reading of ordinance number 17-71.
Ordinance number 17-71, an ordinance supplementing the 2017 appropriations ordinance to provide additional funding for administrative service wage line item.
This was read as a first reading at your last meeting, just to provide some additional staffing capacity, which Ms. Feller can elaborate on.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. Before you today is the ordinance to supplement the wages line item for administrative services. This comes as a direct result of one of our tenured employees leaving mid-year and leaving with a substantial payout to her leave balances, which affected our wages line item. As a result, we were fortunate enough to bring on, in a seasonal capacity, Michelle Kohler, who had recently retired at the beginning of the year, to assist us in the time in which Julie had left, and we found a replacement. Since that time, Michelle has been a great benefit to our office, and she's also begun to assist us on the transition of our personnel records going completely digital, which we hope to have that completed in early 2018. That project is very time consuming and does require a detailed eye and going through and auditing virtually every employee personnel file that we have, auditing against paper file, against the electronic file, and so Michelle has shown to be a proven asset in that regard and tending to accuracy. And so we're thankful for her help, and we're hopeful that you're supportive of this effort to get those records transitioned over. So we are seeking your approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Question. So just so this supplemental then is just appropriation is for this project?
It's not specifically for that. It came as a kind of as a result of that transition and recognizing that we needed to shore up our electronic records versus our paper records in an effort to get those completely digitized moving forward. So we no longer maintain a paper source.
So I'm just trying to get my hands around after this. You said this project, this document transfers over.
Correct.
In the early part of 18, then there's no more.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is a definite end time.
And Chris, just keep in mind what Jessica said is this is to cover the payout for one employee leaving and
Julie's
then
payout.
being able to hire. We have a new administrative assistant.
do.
So now she started, so that's where there's deficit in the cost.
Okay.
Any other questions? What is the wish of council?
Move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1771.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of ordinance 1771.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Schaefer, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Item 13 is consideration of resolution number 17-62. Elena, if you'll please read this into the record.
Resolution number 17-62, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a local public agency agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation for the Point Railroad Bridge Replacement Project, Del 36-11.03 and to execute contracts as required to design, acquire property for, and to construct project.
And this is really the second action council last in regards to the Point Railroad Bridge Replacement Project, which is the single largest transportation project the city has undertaken since the bypass was built in the 1960s. It's a huge project requiring the federal government, the state government, more money, and tonight before you is legislation that would authorize us to enter into agreements with the consulting engineer, which would get the first phase of the project underway. And with that, Bill can elaborate on some of the other particulars.
Sure. Thank you, Tom. I mean, this is really exciting because we're right on the cusp of being able to. We brought a bunch of presentations before you over the past year and a half. So this is right where kind of the rubber meets the road on it. The LPA agreement is last necessary step that allows us to get into the contract with our consultant, Gannett Fleming, to actually start the design work, and we hope that's going to happen early this December. The LPA agreement really just assigns responsibility through the entire project process of who does what of all the entities that Tom just mentioned. And on page 3 and 4 of the agreement, it's one of your attachments, it will show X in the columns of who's contracting with certain engineering, who's responsible for right of way, who's responsible for utility and construction. So all that's spelled out. Also include and a summary of funding, which the final number, total number, matches the summary of funding. That's the picture, more of the pie chart that we've been showing you. LPA breaks it up a little differently because their percentages are based on how the state breaks up their funding and federal funding within their system, but the bottom line is the same. Our anticipated out-of-pocket cost remains the same. So the assigning responsibility is pretty well a fixed item, but the funding obviously, and we've said before, is subject to change, and the change should be positive to our side. We're going to work very, very hard, will contribute, continue to go down. The way we're going to be able to do that is continue to move forward very, very aggressively. The advice coming from the state is to demonstrate the city commitment to the project and to keep it moving fast by bringing forth legislation like this timely and being able to prove it quickly. We can get into that contract with our consultant and move forward rapidly. That's going to put us in a much better position to demonstrate our commitment to go back for further requests for federal and state funds. So the agreement tonight really just establishes that relationship and allows really the city manager to sign multiple agreements as they come, not just our consulting agreement with Norfolk Southern, with private utility companies for utility relocates, landowner agreements, and contractor agreements. All those will be signed and come over the next 4 years, but it allows city manager to sign those and expedite those without having to bring every single step back to council. Of course, we can bring anything that you want to see for comfort level back to you, let the city manager know. But again, the goal is to move forward as fast as we can on the project. So we will have next council meeting a supplemental appropriation before you, and that will allow for about $1.1 million, and that will allow the very first phase of the design contract to move forward. That's using state funds. 90% of that is reimbursable of the $3 million grant we got for safety funds. So our out-of-pocket on this very first piece will be about a $100,000 commitment on our side for our expenditure in order to provide about $1 million of design services. And again, that will be back at the next meeting. We're going to ask for consideration to be able to approve that on our first reading to allow us on December 7th, which is our kickoff meeting and for design, is to hopefully be able to deliver signed contracts also to the consultant and let them move forward even before the new year. I can answer any questions regarding the process. I appreciate the support council has on this, and we really hope we can keep this thing moving forward.
And go ahead. No, it's long term. I mean, you're talking about a project that will probably go to construction in 21 or 22 in terms of, but you have to, and that's just the length of these projects, and a project of this complexity requires that amount of time.
We'll do everything we can to expedite all the engineering and fact, we just last week expedited some expenditure to get Norfolk Southern on board even sooner to be able to start that process. Reality is that the bulk of the available funding for construction isn't available until 23 or 24. It doesn't mean we can't borrow aggressively to be able to start the project sooner, but getting all these steps out of the way, the design, red flag work, environmental clearance, these next 18 to 24 months is critical. It's good to define the project, define the approach, and be able to, at the end of that period, hopefully by the halfway through 2019, we'll know what it's going to look like, how it's going to impact, and be able to adjust our schedules, our costs, and at that point apply for additional funds to finish the project up.
And there will be a civic engagement, public participation process involved along the way.
Quite a
So
bit.
there will be opportunity for public input, public comment, and that's an important part of this.
And the difference is still about 6 million that we need to come up with, right?
Yeah, well, that's our local, but we also
Right.
have about $1 million, 1.1 of anticipated JED revenue designated for this too. But I would say, yeah, there's a gap of 6 million that we hope to cut at least in half if we can stay very aggressive with our project approach.
So if we look at 6 million, then we get $1 million from the JED, and then so now we're down to 5. Is that what you're thinking?
No, the
Or
6 is
plus that.
the 6 is in addition to the JED.
Right. Yeah, we're hoping.
And we have made,
Fingers crossed.
we have made a request to Delaware County as well that they consider participating in this type of project because of its regional significance. It is a competitive advantage project that was ranked by MORPC as part of a very involved process where they looked at regional projects. And so we feel there's a compelling reason, a compelling need to have the county participate financially. So we'll continue those conversations with them in that regard.
And our costs are all inflated costs, assuming that we're not going to be building until 2022, 2023. So they're much higher than today costs, but we want to always present worst case scenario in order to make sure we can fund appropriately the budget and actually acquire additional funding through state and federal sources that will cover whatever gap it may be during construction.
Any other questions for Bill? Anyone?
I just every time you say 2023, I just can't.
I know.
It's so far away.
It does.
But you still need to approve, we still recommend you
I know.
approve it.
Any questions?
You've got 7 years over.
Questions, you two?
No. No, the question was, will it involve any contracts with the county? And no, it won't.
I move for the adoption of resolution 17-62.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Jones, a second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Schaefer?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good luck. Item 14 is consideration of ordinance number 17-72. Elaine, if you'll please read this in the record.
Ordinance number 17-72, an ordinance for the Judith D. Hook Revocable Trust for approval of a rezoning amendment for approximately 44.258 acres on parcel number 519-312-01-009-000 from R4 Medium Density Residential District and R6 Multifamily Residential District to R3 One Family Residential District and located on the west side of Troy Road.
So this is the first reading. We'll get a presentation next with our public hearing. Right. Okay, item 15 is consideration of ordinance 17-73.
Ordinance number 17-73, an ordinance declaring the improvement to certain parcels along Central Avenue in the city to be a public purpose and exempt from taxation pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 5909.40B, providing for the collection and deposit of service payments and specifying the purposes for which those service payments may be expended and authorizing school compensation payments and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. This ordinance is declared to be an emergency measure necessary of the immediate preservation of the public peace, property, health, safety, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason that this ordinance is required to be immediately effective in order to facilitate the commencement of construction of the project. Wherefore, this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Whew, thank you.
Can you repeat that? I didn't catch it.
Glad she did that.
Mr. Hughes.
Madam Mayor, members of council, good evening. What we bring before you this evening is an opportunity to allow us to utilize development to pay for much needed infrastructure improvements to Central Avenue. As we all know, at the Bueller's Center there, we've had traffic issues. What this would allow us to do is to invest in turn lane improvements that would utilize not only public money from redirected taxes from the parcels, but also private monies that are contributed by the developers that are doing those developments on the two outlots in front of Bueller's. This is a tax increment finance tool that is it's a non-school TIF. So it's only utilizing monies that are not going towards to the school districts, being Delaware City Schools or the Delaware Area Career Center. Those monies will continue to go to the schools. In lieu of taxes for non-school or for the other proceeds, the developers and property owners will pay, make payments to a fund through the county treasurer, who then puts it to us to be put on for these traffic improvements. We estimate that the fund itself would generate about $140,000 off of the 4 parcels in about a 30-year time period. The 4 parcels, only 2 of them would actually have real new property improvements, being buildings to collect significant revenue off of. The others obviously have buildings on them already, so you're really only collecting triennial improvements on those. So the revenue generated off of those is fairly little, unless Bueller's changes greatly someday, and then those improvements would be collected as well. Even though this is a parcel TIF and not a district TIF, we made sure that it followed the guidelines set forth in ordinance number 555 that established the tax increment financing district principles in 2005, being that the TIF proceeds are used for a public purpose, and these are needed improvements to Central Avenue. The boundaries of the proposed TIF will not impact future opportunities to utilize other parcels for further improvements. The road improvements will be completed within 30 years, hopefully. That's what I understand from Bill, of the proposed TIF. Improvements funded by the TIF benefit the entire community. Improvements are accessible with sidewalks and ADA ramps. This is a non-school TIF and therefore does not impact the schools. Other agencies supported by property tax revenues were considered, but due to the nature of the TIF only being for improvements and not through baseline tax values, meaning the baseline taxes that are being paid right now for the properties today continue to be paid off to the schools as well as the other county agencies. The TIF revenues have little impact on them. While we're not charging an administrative fee for administering the TIF, we're collecting contributions from the developers to be applied to the public improvements. That was another part of the guidelines that were set forth in 2005. What we're asking for is $50,000 contributions from the 2 developers that would be developing the outlots. So altogether, we're hoping that the TIF revenues and the private funds from those 2 developments would be sufficient to make the improvements necessary to Central Avenue. The Central Avenue improvements wouldn't be kicked in or needed to be accomplished until such time that the Jackson development, which is the bank development that you've seen started now, put a tenant in there that required more traffic than we see today, or the second parcel to the west, second outlot to the west developed. We would then evaluate and make those improvements.
So is that 50,000 a piece or combined?
Correct. That is per parcel.
Per parcel, okay.
We're just asking this as a first reading tonight. Ask your consideration on it at the next meeting.
Anybody have questions for Bill or for Sean on this?
Just one quick comment is that increasingly we are seeing more municipalities consider this as a tool for development, just with the increasing cost of infrastructure and the changes in how banks are financing infrastructure for projects. You're looking at other tools. And so while this one isn't going to generate a huge sum of money, it does provide the part of a gap for that improvement so when that's ready to happen. And I just asked Bill, what's the trigger, Bill, for the actual improvement?
For the eastbound left turn lane would be the next large development, which would be probably the south or northwest corner of that western intersection on the old Bueller site. So that's when we anticipate that being the trigger.
And what we're going to have to consider, council, ultimately, is obviously this is over a long period of time, so it's not like these dollars are available right away. It could be in terms of the developer, but so we'll have to be looking at some options in terms of how that gets financed and how it gets built. So.
Wait, they'll say which one's going to trigger this?
Where the
one that's not built yet,
where the
or-
vacant house is.
The last
Okay.
outlot.
The rental house that the Bueller family or Bueller company owned.
So with the new business going to Bueller's Planet Fitness, do you anticipate this creating a lot more traffic? I mean, I don't know if they hope to, but
No,
were
we
you worried
looked,
about that at all?
no, we looked at, because the Bueller traffic load was so large relative to the combined Panera, the new, I guess, small center out front and Planet Fitness, it really puts the trigger back to that last outlot.
Okay.
Planet Fitness submitted a very elementary traffic study, I guess, for lack of a better term, to us, and I think they generated about a third of what Bueller's did in a given day.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item 16 is city manager's report.
Working on the budget, which will be presented to City Council electronically on Wednesday. We'll then have printed copies bound for you following that. I know we talked about trying to do perhaps a retreat sometime in the first part of the year. I'll have Elaine reach out to council to find out availability of dates sometime in the first couple of months of the new year to do some sort of
Is this in addition to the one we have in the second?
That's budget.
You guys mentioned you wanted a retreat in 2018.
I think the discussion about doing something in the early part of the year, some sort of
So there's no retreat on the second?
Yeah, there is.
budget,
Budget.
Chris.
Oh.
Budget, this is, goal setting, that kind of thing, yeah. Yeah, the budget work session is set for the second. Yeah, this is 2018, so that's, Veterans Parade, thanks to the mayor and others, staff, Lee and police and public
And
works.
Elaine and Chris and
everybody
Lisa.
else. It was great. I thought it was really went off nicely. And the Cicada visit, the mayor can elaborate, went very, very well. And there is an open house for the courthouse on the Saturday, December 2nd. So if you haven't had an opportunity to take a look at the new courthouse, do so. It's a really nice building.
Public open house?
It's
Or is that-
December 2nd, pardon?
It's a public open house?
Yes, it's for the entire, yes. So tell your neighbors and friends and whatnot, and see if you can take advantage of it. It's very nice. And our comprehensive plan, we received proposals last Friday, several of them that worked, 5 proposals for the updating of our comprehensive plan, and that's going to take place, start this year, wrap up towards the end of 2018. And that's a huge opportunity for the public to get involved in kind of the future of how the city continues to grow and develop. So, and Dave, I know that's something that will be taking up a lot of Dave and his staff's time in 18. That's all.
Okay, Mr. Jones?
Just briefly, first congratulations to Mr. Browning, the mayor, vice mayor, John, on your reelection. Congratulations. Hats off to Elaine, Carolyn, everybody involved with the Vets Parade. It was great. I had the privilege of driving one of our Purple Heart recipients. The guy was Richard Burr, who was fascinating to talk to. Just want to clarify that I will not be here on the 27th. So I was here tonight, obviously, but it's my fault for getting that my dates confused. But I will not be on the 27th. I'll be in Minnesota for the week for my biannual meeting. I had for work, and that's all I have.
Thank you.
Mrs. Keller? Just a very small point. I spoke with Mr. Holman earlier about it today, just about maybe not putting motions to excuse council members as part of our agenda since it is at the council's pleasure. And at some point, we may decide, probably not in this case, Mr. Jones, but there may be an occasion where we choose not to excuse, so maybe that should just be a motion that comes from council rather than it being included on the agenda. And then there won't be confusion.
Sure.
About when we can be here.
Okay.
That's it.
Mr. Browning?
A group of residents from Hall Drive and Hawthorne and Cotswold got together with Chief Pijanowski and Mr. Farino, talking about traffic volume and speeding, and actually came up with a number of potential solutions that look real good. So the two of them are working on things, and that group will be back to you inside of 4 to 6 months.
Very good. Mr. Hort?
Congratulations to the board for your reelection.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Allinger?
I have nothing.
Okay. Well, thank you again for all your help for the Veterans Day Parade. I think it was fantastic. I was so pleased to see that many people on the streets, even though there was a Ohio State football game. I was very happy, and I think all the veterans, that's been our biggest one yet. I think we had close to 600 participants in the parade itself. People just showed up that day and wanted verbal rides, and we somehow pulled it off. So thank you to everybody who helped. Lisa, you gathered kids together and passed out. We had 2,000 flags to be passed out prior to the parade. Our troop bailed the night before, so thank you for being able to call on friends and to make it all happen. Last week was the cicada visit. Was Tom and I a little tired?
Yeah, still feeling
It was 5 days of phenomenal busyness. The schedule was great. Thanks to all the staff who participated. Elaine, for all your work with the itinerary, the Thanksgiving dinner. I've had several emails from Hill thanking me again. I think it was a great visit, and we accomplished a lot by visiting the museums, the Arts Castle, the Symphony, and our plan moving forward to hopefully planning in 18 and bringing their culture here in 19 through symphonies with their taiko drums, with their artwork at the Arts Castle and Gallery 22. The Ken Domar exhibit will probably be pushed out till 21 or 22. It's going to be very expensive to bring that museum artwork over. He is the famous photographer, and it's going to be about $50,000 to bring it here. We're going to go through some grants, both through the Japanese and the American arts, as well as Cicada is willing to pay a portion of it. So we'll need to do some fundraising for our portion, but it'll be well worth it. It would most likely be at the Ross Museum, providing that we couldn't cover up some of the skylights so that there's no ultraviolets to damage any of these. So there's a lot to think about, the thickness of the walls, how much they can hold. I mean, their questions were phenomenal, so we're working on that. I guess it's a lot, yeah. I just feel like it's been a whirlwind. So with that, I will look for a motion to, can we go over the dates real quickly on budgets?
Yes.
If you don't mind.
Okay, take it from the top, Elaine.
Okay, great, because I have no calendar in front of me and my phone's not here, but December 2nd is a Saturday. We were going to meet for a half day, starting, was 8 to noon, I think is what everyone was looking at. And then Monday, December 4th, which is a typical work session to be held on, we were going to meet, oh, thank you, great. We were going to meet on that day, and that one we were going to hope to start at 6, maybe go 6 to 9-ish. And if you want to talk about if you want food, that's something we can discuss later. December 7th is a Thursday, and that is a tentative date that we're holding in case it's needed. Then we have our regular meeting on the 11th, which is going to be the second public hearing for the budget. And we, Mr. Homan and I were talking earlier, the 21st, which is a Thursday, is actually the year-end meeting, if that's still agreeable to council, if that's the date, on a Thursday, right before Christmas.
Any objections to any of those from anybody?
Nope, not for me.
What you got?
No,
What's wrong, Lisa?
just the Thursday,
It's tentative.
The 7th
The
or the
21st?
21st.
Oh.
Is,
Yeah, we have to have a
we have
year-end
to do
meeting.
the year-end meeting.
you could do, I spoke with Dean earlier about it, it's just, again, estimating year-end numbers. You could meet on Monday, the 18th. Do it no earlier than that?
It's only 3 days difference, right?
Right, but it's not Thursday, I thought.
I believe last year, I think we met on the 22nd
For
of
me, the
December.
Thursday is the preferred date for me.
Is it?
personally- For me personally.
Okay.
What's everybody else say? George?
No preference. And we set the date earlier. We set
It was
last year.
set last year.
Kyle? Jim?
All this work for me. Either one of those. are
Either one.
at this point.
Wait, so we're not meeting on the 18th?
Correct.
No, that's just a day you could potentially, if you wanted
So the
to.
21st, yeah.
What day are our council meetings in December? The
Well, it
11th?
should be
and the
the 11th
25th.
and the 25th.
Okay, but we're not doing the 25th.
Correct.
And the
Yeah.
21st.
The 21st is in lieu of that.
Would you prefer to do the 25th?
No. I will be busy that day. Okay. Go ahead with whatever works for everybody.
So that's
Okay.
the schedule as of now, unless I hear you
Yep.
want to
We're gonna
make any changes.
I just don't like 8 a.m. on Saturday morning.
I
I'll
don't
be
either.
honest.
I don't either.
Don't make it 9.
Yeah.
Make it 9?
Can we still leave at noon?
We're making progress. It's up to you.
I don't want to miss the Main Street stuff.
What time's that?
It's at 1.
Why don't we just make it that, our goal? And you don't have to, as you leave the Main Street stuff.
Well, just come in a few minutes before that, so that we're settled and we're ready to go. at
8:45 to 9.
Dash for Dasher is at 11.
It's
What's
11
that?
at 1, the dash for
Oh,
Dasher.
I'm going to miss the dash for, what is it called?
Dash for
Dasher.
Dasher. It's kind of.
The open house is at 1 though, Lisa.
I think it's
I
kind
mean, the
of.
Santa house is at 1.
So we started at 8:45.
Yeah, let's do 8:45. Carolyn said that. That way you start at 1.
That way we started. I just
Yeah.
heard it.
Are we doing the 18th or the 21st for the year?
I think we're going to the
21st.
21st.
We'll stick with that, yeah.
21st.
Yep.
Okay? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned at, I'm on my time, can't see it.
7:54.
Thanks.
Okay, what time on the 21st is the meeting?
Elaine, the 21st
Seven.
meeting, 7 or 6?
Unless somebody wants it earlier.
You can have it earlier if you want.
You did.
Yeah.
You said no.
Yeah, he
Leave it
was
at
a-
7.
He was a salesman.
I think the 21st is our normal time.
And, yeah, he's a fascinating guy.
Purple Heart at Heartbreak Ridge.
You know? Oh, nice, yeah, I didn't know that.